You consume it daily. You go through more than you probably realize. You are literally made of it. But how much do you really know about water? Join me, Lake Storywater, and my droid, H2O, as we travel in search of the science behind water and water-related concepts. This is Story of Water. Water is the life-giving substance that the universe provided for all organisms on earth. But what water giveth, it also taketh. Water is at the root cause of many of the worst natural disasters in history. In this episode, we'll discuss some of the catastrophes water has caused, the economic and death tolls of these incidents, and more. We will only be looking at events from the last 200 years, simply because prior to this time, any records of these events tend to not be as accurate.
Floods.
Floods are a great example. In the book of Genesis in the Old Testament, the story of Noah and his ark tells of a great flood that wiped out most of the earth's people. This flood could have no doubt been great, but we have no idea how many people actually perished. Two floods in China also have varying estimates on how many people died, but even at the low end of the estimates, they are the two deadliest floods ever. The first flood occurred in 1887 along the Yellow River. After days of steady rainfall, the river rose over dikes built by farmers meant to contain the river. The flood spread very quickly throughout northern China. An area of 50,000 square miles was estimated to be covered by water. At least 900,000 people were killed, although some estimate that 2 million were killed. 2 million people were also left homeless, and many more suffered through lack of drinking water, lack of food, and disease. The second flood occurred in 1931 along the Yangtze River. It started with an above-average winter buildup of snow in the mountains. This was followed in the spring by a period of heavy rain that combined with the melting snow and ice. By summer, many places had already begun flooding. The summer only brought worse weather, as a higher number than usual of cyclones also hit the area. In July alone, several places recorded 24 inches of rain, and the river reached its highest recorded level. In August, a high-level water mark was recorded 53 feet above the average level of the river. Finally, on August 25th, a major dike gave way on Lake Gaoyu, which combined with the previous flooding, left an area over 3 times greater than the previous flood, 180,000 square miles, covered in water. That's larger than the state of New York. Estimates vary here, but at least 150,000 people drowned and 2 million died due to the resulting famine and disease, although some sources claim that as many as 4 million died. The worst flood in terms of financial devastation occurred in 2011 in Thailand. With a rainier than normal monsoon season, when Tropical Storm Nak 10 made landfall on July 31st, this began the major flooding. Heavy rains throughout August and into September made the floodwaters continue to expand, and by October, the capital city of Bangkok was inundated. Some places had up to 10 feet of floodwater. As a result of the flood, 13.6 million people were affected. 65 of Thailand's 76 provinces were declared flood disaster zones, and an estimated $46.5 billion of damage occurred.
Cyclones, typhoons, and hurricanes.
Powerful storms can create heavy rains that lead to floods, and there are no more powerful storms than cyclones, typhoons, and hurricanes. What's the difference between these three? Technically, they are all types of cyclones. Cyclones are large air masses that rotate around a strong low-pressure center. They are just known by different terms, depending where they are located. Cyclones are found in the Indian and South Pacific Oceans. Typhoons are found in the Northwest Pacific Ocean. Hurricanes are found in the Northeastern Pacific and Atlantic Oceans. The deadliest storm ever was the Bola cyclone. On November 8, 1970, the Bola cyclone developed from the remnants of another tropical storm over the Bay of Bengal. It traveled north, rapidly intensifying until it made landfall in East Pakistan, which is now Bangladesh, on November 11th. With winds increasing up to 140 miles per hour, it continued traveling through the Ganges River Delta. Combined with a high tide during the early morning hours of November 12th, it brought a 20-foot storm surge that devastated much of the low-lying plains and islands. Since the worst of the storm happened at night, many of the residents of this area were sleeping and did not receive any warning. About 500,000 people were killed, making this one of the world's deadliest natural disasters. The largest and most intense storm ever was Super Typhoon Tip. On August 12, 1979, the pressure in the center of the typhoon, while it was over the western Pacific Ocean, was recorded at 870 millibars, which was the lowest sea level pressure ever recorded on Earth. The lower the pressure, the more intense the storm, because the low pressure pulls in more air faster, creating higher wind speeds. The diameter of the typhoon was about 1,380 miles, which is equal to the distance from New York City to Dallas. On October 19th, it ended up making landfall in southern Japan, causing flooding and other damage with its high winds. If you measure intensity by wind speed, then the most intense storm ever was Hurricane Patricia. On October 22, 2015, it grew from a tropical storm to a Category 5 hurricane in only 24 hours, while over the Pacific Ocean south of Mexico. The following day, the 23rd, Patricia's winds reached the record speed of 215 miles per hour. Later that day, Patricia made landfall near Jalisco, Mexico, and while the winds had decreased, they were still 150 miles per hour. In fact, it was the most intense Pacific hurricane ever at landfall. However, just as it rapidly intensified, it also weakened rapidly, thanks in part to the Sierra Madre Mountains zapping its power, and it dissipated the next day. The most intense Atlantic hurricane to make landfall was a 1935 Labor Day hurricane. This was before they gave hurricanes names. When it made landfall in the Florida Keys, its pressure was recorded at 892 millibars, and it had wind speeds of 185 miles per hour. The hurricane created a storm surge of up to 20 feet that destroyed roads, railways, and even entire towns. It doesn't take the fastest winds or the lowest pressure to cause the most damage. The most devastating hurricane in terms of economic impact was Hurricane Katrina. On August 29, 2005, Katrina made landfall in Louisiana with wind speeds of 125 miles per hour. However, it wasn't the winds that caused the most damage. It was the storm surge that was up to 20 feet. That, combined with the location of the storm's path, which brought it over the city of New Orleans, made for the perfect storm. Much of New Orleans lies below sea level, and it is bordered by Lake Pontchartrain to the north and the Mississippi River to the south. The city had levees installed to protect from flooding, but they could not handle the storm surge, and so they gave way to catastrophic flooding. More than 80% of the city flooded, in some places up to 20 feet. Many people had to climb to their rooftops to wait for rescue. Others made their way to the Superdome, which was supposed to be a shelter of last resort, where they had to wait for several days before being rescued. Katrina in total took the lives of 1,836 people, mostly around New Orleans. Half of the city's population was also displaced permanently, falling from 485,000 to 230,000. Katrina also destroyed 30 oil platforms and caused 9 oil refineries to close. Not only did this cause a major decrease in U.S. oil production, it also caused many environmental issues due to oil spills, including the closure of 16 national wildlife refuges. In the end, the economic impact was officially tallied at $125 billion. However, some estimates place it even higher, at $161 billion.
Tsunamis.
While storm surges of 20 feet can cause an extreme amount of damage, that's not even close to the height of water waves tsunamis can cause. A tsunami is a series of high ocean waves caused by a large and sudden displacement of water. The 2 worst tsunamis that we'll discuss were caused by earthquakes. The deadliest tsunami occurred in the Indian Ocean on December 26, 2004. It was caused by an undersea earthquake centered off the northwestern coast of Sumatra, Indonesia. The 9.1 magnitude earthquake was the 3rd largest earthquake ever recorded, releasing an amount of energy equal to that of thousands of atomic bombs. It is no wonder that this amount of energy produced a 100-foot-high wall of water radiating out in all directions like ripples from a rock thrown in a pond. The first city to feel the tsunami's power was Banda Aceh in northern Sumatra. In a matter of minutes, the city of 320,000 was leveled, and 100,000 residents were instantly killed by the enormous mountain of water. With more open ocean, the waves gained phenomenal speed, up to 500 miles per hour, and struck Thailand. Up to 5,400 people died here. Across the Indian Ocean, the gigantic waves struck southeast India, killing over 10,000, and the island nation of Sri Lanka, killing over 30,000. In all, just under 230,000 people perished in 14 different countries. The worst tsunami in terms of economic destruction occurred in the Pacific Ocean on March 11, 2011. This was also caused by an undersea earthquake, this time only 45 miles east of Japan. This 9.0 magnitude earthquake was the fourth largest ever recorded. This energy ended up producing waves of 133 feet that traveled at 435 miles per hour. The waves were so powerful that they traveled 6 miles inland and killed almost 20,000 people. What made this disaster so expensive, however, was that the combination of the earthquake and resulting tsunami caused the Fukushima Daiichi nuclear power plant to shut down and the emergency generators to fail. This led to 3 nuclear meltdowns, 3 explosions, and the release of radioactive contamination, which would become the worst nuclear disaster since Chernobyl. The World Bank estimated the economic cost of this disaster to be $235 billion, while the Japanese government put that number higher at $309 billion. Either amount still makes it the costliest natural disaster in history.
Winter storms and blizzards.
So far, all of the previous disasters had to do with liquid water, but what about frozen water? We can't leave snow and ice off this list. The deadliest blizzard occurred in Iran in 1972. From February 3rd through the 8th, several severe winter storms consisting of heavy snow and sub-zero temperatures tracked over Iran. Some rural areas in the northern and central parts of the country received almost 10 feet of snow over that time. That, however, wasn't even the worst of it. Parts of southern Iran got 26 feet of snow dumped on it. Not only did that amount of snow cover anything less than 3 stories tall, the weight of it crushed trees, power lines, and vehicles. The only means to travel to these areas was by helicopter. So it is no surprise then that more than 4,000 people who were buried under the snow perished. The costliest winter storm was also the most recent water disaster. Winter Storm Uri, as it was unofficially known, occurred in North America in February 2021. The storm formed off the Pacific Northwest coast on February 13th. The storm moved southeast over the Rockies into Texas, while a trough developed over the central United States. The trough brought significant amounts of moisture and cold air into the storm in Texas, creating heavy snowfall amid sub-freezing temperatures. The Texas power grid wasn't able to handle the extra demand for heating, and blackouts occurred, leaving 4.5 million Texans without power. The storm then headed northeast, spawning tornadoes in the southeast and heavy snow all the way up to northeast Canada. This storm's snowfall, combined with the previous snow cover over the U.S., left 75% of the continental U.S. covered in snow. The storm left 223 people dead in the U.S. and was estimated to have caused $20.4 billion in damages. Although some of these disasters were considered once-in-a-century events, we are seeing bigger storms with heavier rainfall over longer periods occurring more often. Rather than once in a century, they may now actually be once-in-a-decade events. This is due to climate change, as a warmer atmosphere can hold more water vapor, and more water vapor gives more energy to storms. I'll leave you with a sobering statistic. From 1970 to 2019, weather disasters have claimed more than 2 million lives worldwide and caused $3.64 trillion in damage. So, while we will not be able to prevent these events from happening, with proper preparation, we can hope to minimize the damage from these water disasters. Thanks for joining us on Story of Water. If you liked what you heard, why not subscribe to this podcast on your favorite podcast provider? Let your friends and family know about it as well. Connect with us and listen directly at www.story-of-water.com. Check out the blog or email us feedback. If you really enjoyed the show, become a Patreon supporter. Just click the donate button on our website. Remember, stay hydrated. See you next time on Story of Water.